The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty expanse of the Texas plains, where the wind whispered secrets through the tall grass. A lone figure stood at the edge of a weathered ranch, its once vibrant paint peeling like forgotten dreams. The homestead, surrounded by barbed wire and an old wooden fence, bore the scars of relentless seasons and hard labor. It was here, amidst the remnants of a broken world, that Clara Ellison found herself each day, the weight of her past and the uncertainty of her future clinging to her like the dry heat. Clara moved with purpose, her hands roughened by years of toil as she hung freshly washed linens on a line that swayed in the breeze. Each sheet flapped like the wings of birds, desperate to escape the confines of their cage. Her thoughts drifted, not to dreams of a better life, but to the daily grind that consumed her. This was her world, a modest existence punctuated by the rhythmic task of laundry, the mundane a refuge from a heart that knew too well the sting of loss. With every stroke of the cloth against the line, she pushed back against the memories that threatened to engulf her. On the horizon, a cloud of dust heralded the arrival of Nathaniel Graves, a millionaire rancher with a reputation as expansive as his wealth. His ornate carriage pulled by sleek horses came into view, a stark contrast to the simplicity of Clara's life. Nathaniel, with his tailored clothes and self-assured smile, embodied a world Clara had glimpsed only in fleeting moments, a world where words could be currency and laughter was often a weapon. He leapt down from his carriage, the sound of his boots crunching on gravel like distant thunder. Clara paused, her heart quickening, sensing a storm in his laughter. "I'll give you my ranch if you can translate this," Nathaniel bellowed, holding up an old, tattered book. The leather cover was worn, the spine cracked from years of neglect, a relic of history that had once held promise. The $1 million challenge hung in the air, dripping with bravado. His arrogance danced around him like the dust, suffocating those who dared to breathe it in. Clara met his gaze, her dark eyes steady, betraying nothing. She had learned early in life that silence could be more powerful than words, a lesson learned from the hardships that life had etched upon her soul. There was a stillness in that moment, the kind that settles in the spaces between heartbeats. Clara stepped forward, her hands still stained from the day's labor, the sun casting a halo around her. She reached out, taking the book gently from Nathaniel's hands, her fingers brushing against his. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, his confidence momentarily wavering. Clara opened the book, revealing faded pages filled with echoes of another time, a language that sang of love, loss, and the weight of history. The words trembled on the tip of her tongue, yet she held them back, letting the silence speak instead. Clara's expression softened, as if the words themselves were breathing life back into the cracked edges of her existence. She sensed Nathaniel's impatience, the way his shoulders squared, ready to dismiss her, but she stood firm, a quiet presence amidst his bluster. In that moment, it was not the challenge of translation that held power, but the recognition of their vastly different worlds colliding, the arrogance of wealth against the resilience born of hardship. The cadence of the plains pulsed around them, a testament to the strength found in humility. As twilight began to stretch its fingers across the sky, the sun sinking low into the horizon, Clara gently closed the book, their eyes locked for a heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Silence settled, thick with unspoken truths, and in that charged air, the ranch became more than just a battleground for pride. It was a space where wisdom could rise from unexpected roots, where a humble washerwoman might just teach a millionaire rancher the value of a language far richer than any printed word. The air was thick with tension, the golden light of evening casting an ethereal glow on the pair, standing at the threshold of understanding. Just as Clara found solid ground in the quiet spaces between her heartbeats, an unexpected figure emerged on the scene, shrouded by the swirling dust. He appeared as if the earth itself had conjured him, a stark silhouette against the fading sun, his wide-brimmed hat cloaking his features, leaving only the shadow of his jawline visible. The tall stranger walked with a deliberate grace. Every step exuded a calm certainty that caught Clara's attention, distracting her momentarily from Nathaniel's impatient presence. The newcomer halted at the fence line, leaning against the splintered wood, arms crossed as he surveyed the unfolding scene. There was a stillness about him that contrasted sharply with the restless energy Nathaniel radiated. His shirt, simple yet clean, bore the marks of labor, the fabric a muted blue that harmonized with the evening sky. As the breeze tugged at his loose cuffs, it revealed the tanned forearms of a man who had wrestled with the land, his skin weathered like the ranch that surrounded them. In his steadiness, there was a nuanced wisdom, as if he had carved his existence out of the very soil beneath their feet. Clara felt the air shift as the stranger's presence wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. In his quiet demeanor, she found a reflection of her own heart, hard-earned resilience, clothed in humility. It was strange, this sudden connection she felt, yet it grounded her in the whirlwind of emotions swirling between her and the rancher. The two men stood in contrast, one wielding wealth like a weapon, the other embodying the strength of those who have survived the storm. With Nathaniel's laughter still ringing hollow, Clara turned her gaze to the stranger, her breath steadying in the face of uncertainty. With his piercing eyes now catching the last rays of sunlight, the mysterious figure studied Nathaniel. An eyebrow arched in silent question. The millionaire shifted his weight, discomfort visible as he felt the weight of scrutiny. It was as if the stranger's quiet power drew the essence of the moment, transforming it from a simple challenge into a profound showdown of ideals. Clara sensed a shift in the dynamics between them. The stranger, with his unassuming authority, challenged not just Nathaniel, but the very notion of superiority that hung in the air like an uninvited guest. "Looks like you found a treasure among the weeds, Nathaniel," the man finally spoke, his voice a low rumble that carried a hint of amusement. Clara's heart leapt, the simple words wrapping around her like a warm embrace. In those few syllables there lay an understanding, an acknowledgement that treasures often dwell where one least expects them. She caught the fleeting smile that flickered across the stranger's lips, a shared moment of clarity in a world that often judged by superficiality alone. Clara felt a familiar warmth blooming in her chest, a quiet ember igniting against the chill of solitude. Nathaniel's self-assured facade faltered for a split second as temptation and unease danced in his eyes. Clara's world, once confined to the mundane, now expanded in the presence of this enigmatic figure. As day finally surrendered to dusk, the plains soaked in twilight hues that whispered of possibility. It was a moment suspended in time, one in which a laundrywoman and an unforeseen ally stood on the cusp of a revelation, their lives intricately woven together by the threads of hardship and resilience, ready to confront the illusions that separated rich from poor, loneliness from connection. The air thickened with anticipation, the gathering dusk bathing the trio in a soft palette of gold and violet. Clara stood anchored between Nathaniel and the stranger, the weight of the moment resting heavily on her shoulders. Nathaniel's bravado flickered, cracking ever so slightly under the scrutiny of the unexpected figure. The laughter that had once seemed a weapon now felt hollow, echoing against the encroaching silence like a distant storm losing its ferocity. Clara's heart quickened as she sensed the shift. It was a rare spark of compassion threading through the rigid fabric of masculinity that often drowned such tenderness. The stranger leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Nathaniel, a challenge woven into the subtle arch of his brow. Clara could feel the air pulse around them, charged with unspoken tension. Nathaniel's bravado began to crumble, replaced by a flicker of defensiveness. "I'm merely offering her a chance to prove herself," he blustered, his voice faltering. "A simple translation of a book scarcely matters in the grand design of this world." The words tumbled from his lips, but the bravado felt frayed, unraveling in the face of another man's quiet strength. Clara's heart ached at the unkindness hidden in Nathaniel's bravado. She turned, her gaze steady as she locked eyes with the stranger, who stood silently, inviting her to speak without words. The weight of the tattered book rested heavy against her palm, an anchor to all that had been and all that could be. With a deep, steadying breath, Clara took a step closer to Nathaniel, moving against the current of discomfort that had formed between them. The moment, pregnant with possibility, called for resilience and tenderness wrapped in the determination of the humble. "I can't translate the language of this book," Clara said finally, her voice steady but soft, like a quiet dawn breaking over night. "What I can share is the language of the heart, one you seem to understand, Nathaniel. Your laughter may drown out the voice of the earth, yet it is our stories that connect us to one another." She gestured to the ranch rattling under the weight of history, and Nathaniel's expression shifted, the imperceptible softening of his features revealing a flicker of vulnerability. Clara held his gaze, willing him to hear the echo of truth carried in her words, her heart beating in tandem with the whispers of the land that had shaped them both. The stranger nodded slightly, as if aligning himself with Clara's wisdom. With a mere tilt of his head, he urged Nathaniel to acknowledge the deeper truth that lay hidden beneath layers of arrogance. The air hummed with a new energy, a sense of understanding blooming in the thickening twilight. Clara felt the tension ease, if only slightly, as Nathaniel's bravado dissipated into the twilight, like dust caught in an evening breeze. Nathaniel's shoulders sagged ever so slightly, the bravado giving way to something more vulnerable, more human. He looked down at Clara, really seeing her, and for a fleeting moment, the distinction between the wealthy rancher and the humble washerwoman dissolved. He was merely a man, standing amidst the ruins and remnants of pride, facing a woman who carried the weight of resilience with quiet grace. "Perhaps," he began, his voice softer, threaded with an unfamiliar humility, "the richness of this book lies not only in its words, but in the stories we share." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final glow over the plains, Clara felt the ground begin to shift beneath her feet. It was not just the dance of evening shadows that swayed the moment, but the recognition that could blossom from compassion and understanding. In that sacred suspension of stillness, a delicate thread began to weave a tapestry of connection, inviting the three of them into a new chapter, one where the scars of the past could find solace in the arms of shared wisdom and compassion, no matter their place in the world. The dusk deepened, wrapping the landscape in a blanket of quietude, where the distant chirping of crickets stirred restlessly against the residual warmth. Clara stood between Nathaniel and the stranger, her heart a steady drum against the silence. The tension hung like the last rays of sun caught in the branches of the gnarled trees surrounding them, each figure casting elongated shadows that whispered of their inner conflicts. Clara could sense Nathaniel's frustration simmering just beneath his carefully crafted bravado, while the stranger's calm presence seemed to draw forth the truth from the air, binding them all in unspoken understanding. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, the muscle working beneath the skin, as if grinding against the weight of something unacknowledged, a vulnerability he despised. "You think you can teach me something, don't you?" He spat, each word aimed at Clara like a bullet fired from a distance, seeking to pierce through the veil of her serenity. Clara remained unmoved, her expression calm, but the response to his accusation stirred within her like a stone thrown into still water, rippling outward in waves of emotion she kept in check. The ground felt solid beneath her, as if the earth itself held her steady against the fallout of his arrogance. The stranger, arms crossed still, observed the exchange with a quiet intensity. He shifted slightly, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as if he found amusement in Nathaniel's struggle to maintain dominance. "It's not the lesson you think, Nathaniel," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "It's about listening. The stories we carry in silence speak louder than any translation. Clara knows the language of the heart better than any book." The words lingered, like the scent of rain on dry earth, and Clara felt a bloom of hope within. The stranger's validation wrapped around her like a warm embrace, igniting a flicker of kinship that drew her closer to him, reinforcing the trembling resolve she felt beneath her skin. Nathaniel, caught between pride and his growing unease, shifted his stance, the earlier mirth drained from his face. The laughter he had wielded so carelessly had turned against him, echoing in the growing darkness ahead. Clara watched the flickers of realization cross his features, each a reminder of the weight of her existence, the burdens she had borne not from titles or wealth, but from the rawness of reality. "You don't understand," he muttered, scrubbing a hand across his brow, layers of arrogance peeling back to reveal the frustration that lay beneath. "This is not a game, Clara. It's about power." The words hung, tainted with an inadequacy he struggled to mask. "Maybe that's the problem," Clara countered softly, her voice a balm to the harshness of the moment. She stepped closer, the smell of sun-baked earth and grass surrounding her, grounding them all in shared truth. "You measure power in wealth and possessions, but it lies in resilience, in surviving the storms that life throws at us. We could all learn something that transcends this facade." The conviction in her words ignited a fire within her, a flicker of strength that had often been quelled by her own isolation. Clara dared to meet Nathaniel's gaze, her dark eyes steady, demanding a reckoning not just for him, but for the unseen struggle she had carried alone. The winds shifted again, carrying with them the scent of impending rain, softening the edges of their confrontation. Nathaniel's expression wavered, the layers of bravado softening inch by inch. "What do you know of power?" he challenged weakly. Clara could see the fissures forming in the walls he had built around himself, the marks of struggle now painted across his features, frail and vulnerable against the impending night. She felt the weight of the tattered book between her fingers, a symbol of the deeper truths that lay ahead, if only they dared to reveal them. As the shadows lengthened, the silence settled once more, thick with the intertwining of their destinies. Clara understood that the shift had begun, not just in Nathaniel, but within herself. In that delicate space between words, the quiet power of compassion and understanding threaded through their struggles, drawing together a tapestry woven from the realities they faced. What had begun as a challenge morphed into a poignant exploration of connection, where each heartbeat echoed the hidden stories waiting to emerge from the silence. The evening deepened, the air growing cooler, as the sun's last remnants faded into a soft tapestry of stars. Clara stood firm, her heart steady as the shadows danced around her, each one echoing the vulnerabilities that clung to her like dry earth, clinging to the roots of a weary tree. Nathaniel's bravado had begun to crack, revealing the man's unease, and she sensed the storm of emotions brewing beneath his polished exterior. Here, amid a landscape that had shaped them both, she felt the weight of her own voice, knit into the very fabric of their confrontation. Nathaniel took a step back, his earlier bravado crumbling against the unyielding honesty in Clara's gaze. With each heartbeat, the distance between them seemed to diminish, their shared moments casting a fragile thread of connection forged through unspoken truths. Clara could see the shadows of doubt flit across his features, uncertainty that whispered of a deeper struggle. The softness in her heart stirred as she caught a glimpse of the fragile boy hidden behind the rich facade, one who had been sheltered from the tribulations of life. It was a vulnerability she had known well. It resonated with the scars etched into her soul, and in that moment, something stirred, a shared understanding that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. In the stillness, Clara took a step forward, minding the space that hung heavily between them. The ranch, laden with history and echoes of toil, bore witness to this burgeoning bond. She gestured toward the tattered book, her fingers brushing its spine, tracing the contours etched by time. "It's more than just words," she said, her voice low and resolute, carrying the weight of years of labor and heartache. It tells of forgotten voices, lives intertwined in struggle and triumph, just like ours. Her words hung in the air, delicate yet potent, daring him to see beyond the currency of his wealth. Nathaniel's eyes flickered, trapped in a moment suspended in time as he absorbed Clara's honesty. She watched as the facade of arrogance began to unravel, thread by thread. The laughter that once echoed off the walls of his stature fell silent, replaced by a fragile acknowledgement of vulnerability. Beneath the confident exterior, she saw the longing to connect, to break free from the isolation that wealth often imposed. It tugged at something deep within her, a flicker of hope mingling with the remnants of fear that had held her captive for so long. As the chill of night settled around them, Nathaniel exhaled slowly, a subtle shift in the way he carried himself. The bravado slipped from his shoulders, and for the first time Clara saw a glimmer of authenticity in his gaze, an openness that beckoned her to step closer. "I only wanted to prove I could teach you something," he murmured, the admission low and raw, as if the act of voicing such vulnerability required tremendous courage. The revelation hung in the air like a whispered prayer, an invitation for both of them to confront the walls they had built around themselves in this harsh world. Clara's heart quickened at the shift, her breath mingling with the cool evening air. Here was a man, once wrapped in the conceit of his own making, now standing bare in the face of their shared struggle. She sensed the connection weaving between them, fragile yet formidable, a delicate bridge built from understanding rather than arrogance. Clara hesitated, then stepped closer, her hand hovering near his. In that moment, unguarded and open, they both teetered on the brink of an unraveling, where walls could dissolve and unspoken truths could bloom in the twilight of their lives. Each felt a heartbeat deeper than the clamor of wealth, echoing a promise of growth forged in the fires of their entangled pasts. The air was thick with the scent of imminent rain, the twilight sky transitioning into a deep purplish hue, streaked with the remnants of daylight. Clara remained heartfelt and open, watching as Nathaniel's bravado cracked like a fragile shell. The palpable tension between them pulsed with unspoken understanding, while the stranger's quiet presence anchored them both in the moment. Clara sensed the weight of expectation shift, the challenge that had begun as a contest of words evolving into something more, a fragile thread woven from the depth of their shared humanity. Just then, the stranger shifted, stepping forward with a deliberateness that spoke volumes. With quiet grace, he drew his hat from his head, revealing sun-kissed hair and a weathered face etched with stories of a life lived among the plains. In that instant, Nathaniel's gaze flickered between the two as he witnessed the gesture, an acknowledgement not just of the moment, but of the bond forming in the quiet spaces between their hearts. The stranger's eyes focused on Clara, recognition dawning in his expression as if he could see the strength that permeated every inch of her being. Beneath the silence lingered a dawning realization that their worlds were intertwined, like roots of the same tree twisting through hardened soil. With a slow, purposeful motion, the stranger turned back to Nathaniel, unyielding yet gentle. "You have much to learn, Nathaniel," he said, voice steady like the earth beneath their feet. "That book may hold the words of a forgotten language, but wisdom is often found where arrogance falters." Clara watched the millionaire's expression waver, his defenses beginning to crumble under the weight of the stranger's sincerity. There was no derision in his tone, only an invitation for Nathaniel to see beyond the veneer of wealth, to embrace the understanding that lay in humility. Taking a half-step closer, the stranger gestured to Clara, dignifying her presence in a manner that pulled Nathaniel into their world. "You think your challenge is a measure of worth," he continued, his voice a low rumble against the quiet expanse of the ranch. "But the true measure lies in listening and learning. This woman stands before you, not merely as a washerwoman, but as a vessel of strength and experience." Clara felt the heat of his words wrap around her. a recognition that grounded her spirit, igniting the hope that had flickered in silence for too long. She could hear the distant rumble of thunder, echoing the dawning storm that seemed to mirror the tempest swirling within Nathaniel. At last, the walls around Nathaniel began to crack further, vulnerability peeking through the chinks of his arrogance. He shifted his weight, the facade of power dwindling like the dying light of day. "What do you suggest I do?" he challenged, voice laced with uncertainty. Clara stepped forward, emboldened by the stranger's support, heart pounding like a drum as she stood between them, a bridge linking two disparate worlds. "Start by listening," she offered, voice steady yet tender. "The language of understanding doesn't require translation. It thrives in the silences we often ignore. You might find treasures hidden where you least expect." Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat, the flicker of her words stirring something deep inside him. Clara saw the light glimmer in his eyes, a flicker of hope juxtaposed against the weight of his pride. Taking a deliberate breath, Nathaniel stepped back, the fabric of his tailored shirt straining against the sudden vulnerability he felt. The shadows danced around them, creating a sacred space where the past began to disintegrate, revealing fertile ground for something new to grow. As the storm approached, the intermingling of their lives stood on the precipice of transformation, each heartbeat echoing the promise that humanity thrived not on status or possessions, but on the profound connections that united them in their shared struggle. As a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the plains, the three figures stood poised, Clara steadfast and resolute, the stranger a silent pillar of strength, and Nathaniel piecing together the fragmentary threads of his own unraveling. The night deepened, enveloping them in a cocoon of warmth amidst the coolness of the encroaching storm. In that moment, the barriers of their worlds blurred, and the whispers of the land surrounding them began to rise, infusing the air with the possibility of shared understanding and renewed purpose. The distant rumble of thunder marked the approaching storm, and Clara felt the pulse of the earth beneath her feet resonate with her heart. The air thickened as Nathaniel stood caught between the world of his wealth and the reality of the moment unfolding before him. The shadows around them swirled with anticipation, eager for revelations, hidden beneath layers of bravado and pride. Clara's gaze held steady, the soft glow of twilight illuminating the raw edges of vulnerability painted across Nathaniel's face. She took a breath, her heart steady as she prepared to dig deeper into the uncharted territory they now shared. "I know about loss," Clara said quietly, her voice piercing through the tension that hung in the air. With every word, she felt the weight of her past coalesce around her, the memories surfacing like dust, billowing in the wake of a passing storm. She stepped closer, the movement deliberate, her presence an anchor amidst the rising winds. "My father worked this land until the day he died, his body worn and broken. He lost everything to a drought that seized our home. I stood helpless, watching as the earth turned to ash under his hands." Each word poured forth with the weight of truth, the rawness of her pain echoing in the silence between them. Nathaniel's expression shifted, the earlier arrogance faltering as her words wove a tapestry of shared humanity. Clara continued, her voice steady. "When he passed, I lost more than just a father. I lost the sense of safety and belonging that comes from being loved and nurtured. I became the keeper of our dreams, the one who had to push through the sorrow while carrying the burden of our history. This ranch is not merely a place for me, it's a testament to resilience." The gravity of her revelation hung in the air like a palpable force, drawing Nathaniel into a world he had never fully acknowledged. For a moment, the past surged between them, a river of unspoken understanding that flowed from one heart to the next. Clara caught a glimpse of Nathaniel's own struggles, the shadows that danced behind his confident facade. Was there a loss buried deep within him, she wondered, unseen but ever present? She held his gaze steady, searching for answers beyond the polished exterior that cloaked him. The storm clouds gathered overhead, creating a tension that mirrored the unspoken stories of their pasts, aching to be shared. Then a flicker of recognition crossed Nathaniel's countenance, and Clara knew that her vulnerability had chipped away at his walls. The laughter that had once enveloped him in arrogance crumbled into silence, revealing a man who had, perhaps, been hiding too. "You speak as if loss is a language that could break a man," he murmured, his voice softer, tinged with an understanding that had begun to blossom in the quiet between them. Clara felt her heart swell with compassion as she sensed the shift, a shared recognition of the weight they both bore, each shaped by the soil of pain and heartache. As the first drops of rain began to fall, the world around them emerged anew, refracted in the soft glow of twilight. Clara stood firmly, the storm heralding the promise of renewal, her own resilience intertwined with the fragile connection growing between them. She sensed that it was in that shared pain, the recognition of their pasts, that Nathaniel might find a way to dissolve the barriers that held them apart. As the rain fell softly, melding earth and sky, Clara knew they stood on the threshold of transformation, two souls grounded in their histories, each poised to embrace the wisdom hidden within their scars. The rain fell gently at first, a rhythmic patter against the dry earth, mingling with the charged atmosphere between Clara and Nathaniel. Yet with each drop, an undercurrent of tension grew, as if the storm were not merely a meteorological event, but a catalyst for their inner upheavals. Clara, standing firm in her convictions, felt the storm brewing within Nathaniel as he wrestled with the revelations she had shared. His gazes darted between her steady presence and the dusty ground that bore witness to years of toil, tracing the roots of their vastly different worlds. "What do you expect me to do with your story, Clara?" Nathaniel's voice broke the spell of silence, tinged with irritation as the rain intensified, soaking the earth beneath their feet. His bravado surged back like the rising tide, defensive and sharp. "You think just because you've faced hardship that it means something to a man like me? This is a challenge, not a therapy session." The words hung heavy in the air, a blunt instrument that cut deep into the budding connection they shared. Clara felt the sting of misunderstanding pressing against her heart, but she refused to let it dislodge her resolve. Taking a steadying breath, Clara held her ground, refusing to retreat into silence. "It's not about proving anything," she replied, her voice low but unwavering. "It's about understanding that our struggles don't define us, but they can shape us into something more. Your wealth isolates you, Nathaniel. Doesn't that feel like a prison?" A wave of vulnerability washed over her as she met his eyes, willing him to see beyond the gilded cage he had built around his life. She sensed the storm within him, a conflict raging between his self-protective instincts and the awakening awareness that her words ignited. Nathaniel's shoulders tensed, the rain plastering his meticulously styled hair to his forehead, emphasizing the turmoil etched in his features. "You don't know me," he shot back, the edge of his voice rising. "You see a man with money and assume he's never suffered. I've had my share of pain. It's just different." Clara's heart ached at the facade he clung to. Beneath the layers of arrogance was a man afraid to confront the duality of his existence. The rain, a growing wall of sound, resonated like thunder, mirroring the storm of emotions that coursed through them. In that charged moment, Clara recognized the flicker of fear that danced across his eyes, a fear of being seen, of being vulnerable in a world that thrived on displays of power. "It's not about comparing our pain," she pressed gently, her gaze unwavering. "It's about recognizing that we both carry burdens. You might have riches, but if you can't connect, what good are they?" The rain fell harder now, drenching the land and them alike, yet Clara stood strong, her words a lifeline, cast into the tempest swirling around Nathaniel. The tempestuous energy shifted as Clara's sincerity broke against Nathaniel's defenses like waves upon the shore. His bravado faltered, the tumultuous emotions beneath the surface threatening to spill over. But in the midst of this turmoil, Clara sensed a fracture, a crack in the veneer he had so carefully constructed. Yet rather than offering a balm for his unease, the words hung like a heavy shroud. Nathaniel's body remained rigid, a storm of emotions swirling just beneath the surface, while Clara's heart raced with the weight of their shared confrontation. As if sensing his turmoil, the stranger finally stepped back, allowing the intensity of the moment to stretch out between them. The world around them faded, just the rhythmic chant of rain against the parched earth and the unrelenting tension that ignited a flicker of understanding. Clara could feel the ground shifting beneath both their feet, the chasms between their lives narrowing, yet the unspoken misunderstandings loomed larger than ever. The storm raged on, a reflection of the inner conflict each faced, and as lightning sliced the sky, it illuminated the truth. Healing would demand they confront the shadows together, or risk being swallowed whole by their own arrogance and fear. The rain intensified, drenching the Texas plains in a tapestry of sound and shadow, transforming the air into a charged current of anticipation. Clara, standing resolute with the weight of her words, felt the ground beneath her quiver with the promise of transformation. Nathaniel's brow furrowed, the storm around them igniting the fire of reluctant acknowledgement in his eyes. His proud demeanor flickered, like lightning sparking through the night, revealing vulnerabilities he had long buried beneath his wealth. The tension between them hung thick, a fragile thread that threatened to snap under the mounting pressure of the storm. But as they stood in that moment of vulnerability, a sudden gust of wind swept through the ranch, stirring the dust and rocking the old wooden fence, a reminder of the harsh realities that framed their world. Clara's heart leapt, sensing an unease that transcended their personal confrontation. In the distance, shadowy figures emerged through the haze of rain and dust, silhouettes against the dimming light. Riders on horseback, their forms menacing and unfamiliar, silhouetted against the backdrop of an impending storm. The reality of their situation shifted, the weight of the past dissolving as the threat of the present loomed closer, casting a long shadow over the fragile connection that Clara and Nathaniel had begun to forge. Nathaniel instinctively straightened, his instincts as a rancher kicking in as he turned to face the approaching figures. The confidence that had momentarily waned returned, laced with a new urgency. The laughter that once characterized him evaporated into the cold rain, replaced by a steely resolve as he assessed the riders, his posture reflecting a sudden sense of ownership over the situation. Clara felt her pulse quicken, the tension in the air thickening as the reality of their confrontation blended with the external threat, an uninvited force forcing them back into a world of power struggles and survival. "Get away from here!" Nathaniel shouted, his voice rising above the sound of the rain, but it cracked under the weight of uncertainty. Clara stood beside him, the abrupt shift in dynamics igniting an unfamiliar warmth within her. She sensed the unspoken camaraderie forming, the two of them against a world that threatened to tear them apart. But in the chaos of the moment, there was no time for sentiment. Nathaniel's eyes were hard, focusing on the riders who drew closer, their intentions obscured by the darkening sky. The lead rider, a man draped in a tattered coat that flapped violently in the wind, raised a hand, a signal to halt. His voice was low and rough, cutting through the storm's chorus. "We're not here to cause trouble, Nathaniel," he called, a smirk lining his mouth, a glimmer of conquest in his eyes. Clara flinched at the challenge in his tone, the promise of confrontation simmering just beneath the surface. This was no ordinary gathering of ranchers. The air crackled with a danger that could erupt at any moment, forcing Clara and Nathaniel into the eye of a storm even greater than the one raging above. In that pregnant pause, Clara's heart quickened, and she felt the tension like an electric pulse between her and Nathaniel, their worlds colliding once more, but now intertwined with a new urgency. She glanced at him, their eyes locking in a silent understanding that they were not just two people battling their own demons, but now allies caught against an external force that threatened to strip away whatever fragile connection they had begun to build. With the rain soaking through her clothes, Clara gathered her strength, recognizing the truth of their shared moment. Their fight together for survival was a testament to the truths buried deep in the earth beneath them. "Let's not make this worse than it needs to be," Nathaniel murmured, tension lacing his tone as he turned to Clara, the urgency palpable. In that fleeting exchange, Clara saw not just the arrogant man she had initially encountered, but a man willing to confront the complexity of his existence for the sake of connection, ready to rise from the ashes of his pride into something greater. As the riders advanced, the rain poured down like a baptism, cleansing the air, and Clara inhaled deeply, ready for whatever storm awaited them, emboldened by their fragile alliance standing against uncertainty. The storm raged, rain hammering the earth as Clara and Nathaniel stood resolute, side by side, their breath mingling with the cool air. In the distance, the advancing riders drew closer, shifting like ominous shadows against the darkening sky. Clara felt the weight of the moment settle around them, a heavy stillness that spoke louder than any words exchanged before. She stood firm, the warmth of Nathaniel's presence grounding her amidst the chaos, each heartbeat echoing with the unyielding resolve they now shared. Nathaniel's posture spoke volumes. He had shed the veneer of arrogance like a snake casting off old skin, revealing a man driven by urgency and an unspoken loyalty. As the lead rider sneered, Clara sensed Nathaniel's body tense beside her. A flicker of fear gnawed at the corner of his steel facade, but it was tempered by a growing awareness that their fates were intertwined. She glanced at him, their eyes locking again, a silent pledge forged in the heart of the tempest. Here, they stood together against the swirling uncertainty, united by the shared understanding that this moment, like the storm, was beyond their control. The lead rider halted abruptly, his expression twisted into a mocking grin. "What's the matter, Nathaniel? You think you can scare us off with that little lady by your side?" His laughter rang hollow in the midst of the rain, like a challenge thrown into the void. But Clara felt her own resolve bloom in the face of his taunts. She remained steadfast, her heart a steady drumbeat beneath the chaos, knowing that the power of her presence could weave a thread of strength through the cracks of their lives. Without breaking their gaze, Nathaniel stepped forward, the tension radiating from him palpable, as if he were the storm itself. "You would do well to tread lightly, Mark," he warned, the bite in his voice cutting through the rain. Clara felt a flicker of admiration for him. She saw the man he could be when unshackled from the chains of his upbringing. It was evident then that Nathaniel was not merely combating the threat of the riders. He was battling his own insecurities, reasserting the essence of who he was meant to be in the face of adversity. The air thickened with unvoiced emotions, the wind swirling around them as they awaited the rider's response. Clara shifted her weight slightly, anchoring herself against Nathaniel's strength. In that moment, their hands brushed, a brief touch laden with shared courage and solidarity. She thought of the countless hours spent washing linens, battling the ghosts of her past, and here she found herself facing a living embodiment of chaos, standing firm beside a man who had once seemed a world apart. The rain transformed them, washing away the remnants of who they had been, leaving only the essence of who they could become. As the seconds stretched into an eternity, the world around them faded, leaving only the bond they had begun to form against the storm. Nathaniel's defiance filled the space between them, and Clara could see it, a flicker of understanding, of vulnerability, igniting a spark of loyalty that ignited a fire in her heart. Together, they stood under the weight of the rain, a washerwoman and a rancher, woven into the fabric of something greater than either could have imagined. The riders shifted, their laughter fading into the backdrop of the storm, and Clara sensed the tide had turned. In that shared silence, they were no longer defined by their pasts, but by a quiet strength that held the promise of tomorrow. Their lives entwined, forging resilience from the storm. As the rain fell like a curtain, shrouding the Texas plains in a veil of silence, Clara stood resolute, the scent of wet earth mingling with the tension in the air. Nathaniel faced the lead rider, his confidence hardening like steel beneath the onslaught of ridicule. But Clara sensed that beneath the bravado, he was still a man grappling with the expectations of power, his vulnerability barely concealed. The storm had stripped away their facades, revealing the rawness of their humanity, and she could feel the pulse of possibility thrumming between them. The rider's sneer lingered, the dim light reflecting off his features, but Clara felt the weight of the moment shift. She squared her shoulders, a fierce determination igniting within her. "Everyone here has a story," she said, her voice rising above the sound of the rain. "Every scar tells of battles fought, and not one of us is untouched by hardship. You think wealth gives you the right to belittle others, but it only confines you to a gilded cage." The words hung in the air, an anchor that settled the storm of voices swirling around them. Clara's gaze met Nathaniel's, their unspoken understanding forging a connection that transcended their differences. The lead rider faltered, caught off guard by her unyielding spirit. The bravado that had propelled him forward began to waver under the weight of Clara's conviction. Nathaniel, sensing the shift, stepped slightly closer, the distance between them narrowing as they became an inseparable front. The wind whipped through the air, carrying with it Clara's courage, the kind that came not from wealth but from the earth itself, steeped in the trials of survival. She could see the moment the rider's bravado cracked, the realization sweeping across his face as if he suddenly understood the power that lay within words spoken with conviction. Power doesn't come from riches, it comes from the ability to understand those around you, Clara continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke, not just to the rider, but to Nathaniel as well. You, Nathaniel, have riches aplenty, but you are still searching for something more, something real. We each have the ability to rise above our circumstances, even when those circumstances seem unyielding. The rhythmic pulse of her heart echoed her resolve, grounding her amidst the chaos. In that moment, she transformed into a beacon, illuminating the path toward uncharted connections and unexpected understanding. As the rain poured down, Clara felt the tension of the moment shatter, the fragments of arrogance and disdain dissipating like mist in the storm's wake. The riders shifted uneasily, their bravado waning. Nathaniel's gaze softened, his resolve intertwining with hers, and she saw the flicker of admiration reflected in his eyes. In that moment, a bridge formed between them, built on the foundation of shared experiences, the awareness that the true battle lay not in wealth, but in the connections they forged through empathy and understanding. The lead rider took a step back, his sneer fading into uncertainty as he weighed Clara's words. The storm raged on, yet in the heart of the tempest, the air crackled with the promise of change. Clara stood firm in her truth, anchored by her past and emboldened by the present, a humble washerwoman illuminating the shadows of privilege. In that fragile space between storms, they all became aware that the true essence of humanity was not in the riches they possessed, but in the wisdom born from hardship and the willingness to extend compassion, a lesson that could guide them all through the tempest of their lives. As the rain fell in torrents, drenching the earth, Clara and Nathaniel stood together, the barrier of wealth and status slowly crumbling beneath the weight of shared vulnerability. The lead rider recoiled, his bravado evaporating like mist in the downpour. Clara felt the energy shift, a moment poised on the brink of transformation, yet it stirred an unsettling ache deep within her. For every layer of connection they strived to build, the specter of distrust loomed, ready to fracture their fragile alliance. The storm raged on, echoing the turmoil that lingered just beneath the surface of their burgeoning bond. "Boys like you think you can learn from the likes of her?" The lead rider spat, his voice gravelly and defiant, attempting to reassert his authority in the face of Clara's unexpected stand. "You think, if you listen to her sob stories, it'll somehow make you wise. What do you really know of power?" The words cut through the rain, sharp and cruel, yet Clara stood resolute, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Nathaniel's tension beside her, his pride roiling like the relentless wind, but the moments stretched out, compelling her to meet this challenge head-on. Their fate hinged on this precipice, and with it, the hope for the possibility of understanding. "Power isn't about silencing others," Clara declared, her voice steady despite the tremors of uncertainty ebbing at her resolve. "It's about lifting each other up." The raindrops cascaded down her face, yet her gaze remained locked onto Nathaniel's. She could almost feel his uncertainty weighing heavily in the air between them, a mirror reflecting the chaos of their lives. Without breaking eye contact, she stepped forward, her pulse echoing in the tempest, sending a clear message. They could choose to confront this together, or the moment could slip away, leaving them both adrift. "You would do well to keep your mouth shut, washerwoman," the rider growled, taking a menacing step toward Clara. The tension in the air snapped, and Nathaniel, fueled by a protective instinct he could no longer suppress, surged forward. He stepped between Clara and the rider, a barrier of defiance rising within him. Clara felt the heat radiating from him, the embodiment of the moment that had transformed them both. "You don't get to threaten her," Nathaniel said, his voice low but firm, a promise woven within the words. "We all face storms, but it seems you're too blinded by arrogance to see beyond your own." The lead rider's eyes narrowed, caught off guard by Nathaniel's sudden boldness. Clara watched as the two men exchanged silent challenges, the rain pounding around them creating a symphony of tension. She saw something flicker in Nathaniel's gaze, a hint of the man she had caught glimpses of before, a man willing to confront not just the external threat, but the weight of his own privilege, an awakening that could mend the rift between their worlds. But there was still a distance to bridge, a challenge that loomed larger than the storm that battered the Texas plains. "I'll give you one last chance to reconsider," the rider taunted, his voice laced with venom as the storm raged around them. "You think she can translate more than just words? That she can change your fate?" Clara took a step forward, her heart pounding in her chest, ready to refuse the challenge, knowing the risk it posed to their fragile bond. She understood that the road to connection was fraught with peril, but it was a risk worth taking for the chance to quell the animosity threatening to engulf them. In the silence that followed, a realization dawned. Clara lifted her chin, her eyes glistening with resolve, even as the sky rumbled overhead. It was not just about proving herself, it was about unveiling the humanity that lay hidden beneath the facades they wore. The storm had come to wash away the past, the weeds of pride and disdain, and for once, in the fertile ground saturated with rain, the seeds of a new beginning could finally take root. Without looking back at Nathaniel, Clara whispered softly, "I'll answer that challenge. But first, we must learn to listen." The rain swirled around them, each drop a metaphorical cleansing, tearing down the walls that had separated wealth from humility. Clara could feel her heart thrumming in her chest, a steady reminder of the choice she was making to stand her ground. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken truths, and as the lead rider's sneer turned to confusion, Clara took a step forward, her resolve unwavering. She could feel Nathaniel's presence beside her, the tension in his posture shifting slightly towards the support she had unwittingly offered him. "Words can bridge all divides," Clara declared, her voice steady even as the storm swirled around them. She turned to face Nathaniel, willing him to understand the implications of her challenge. "This book weathered and torn, may speak of histories long forgotten, but our hearts still hold the capacity to translate them. The lead rider's laughter faded, replaced by a palpable uncertainty as the sincerity of Clara's intent began to penetrate the air heavy with bravado. Around them the rain intensified, sending rivulets down the worn earth, merging the past and present into a moment of potential transformation. Nathaniel's gaze lingered on Clara, the weight of her words pressing into him like the rain-soaked earth beneath their feet. He felt a swell of admiration for her courage. She was the embodiment of the resilience he had long overlooked in his selfish pursuit of power. It was as if the tempest outside echoed the storm within him, a battle of arrogance yielding to vulnerability. "I can't hide behind wealth forever," he whispered, almost to himself, yet loud enough for Clara to hear. In that instant, a subtle shift took place. The layers of his arrogance began to peel away, revealing a longing to connect, to understand that real power lay not in riches, but in compassion. The lead rider's bravado began to wane, the uncertainty of his position now painfully evident. Clara held her breath, sensing the moment teetering on the precipice between conflict and resolution. "If you wish to challenge me, then dare to listen," she continued, her voice steady and firm. "Dare to learn from those whom you deem beneath you." The rain continued to pour, transforming the surrounding dust into a muddy tapestry that mirrored the complexity of their lives, rich with stories yet to be told. Clara's heart thrummed with the realization that her truth had the potential to dismantle not just Nathaniel's defenses, but those of the man before her as well. In that charged moment, Nathaniel took a step forward, the sound of his boots sloshing through the muddy ground, echoing the resolve forming within him. "You don't understand what you're challenging," he said, his tone firm yet softened by a newfound humility. "But perhaps that's exactly what I've been missing." The lead rider's face clouded with skepticism, but Nathaniel held his gaze, the challenge of vulnerability igniting something deep within him. In stepping forward, he unraveled the threads of his past, embracing the truth that Clara had laid bare. As the storm continued to rage, a sense of vulnerability enveloped the trio, menacing, yet strangely liberating. The rain poured down, washing away the remnants of pride and hostility, leaving only the raw truth of their humanity behind. Clara had stepped into the light, inviting Nathaniel to join her, to confront their shared realities. "I won't back down," she said, her voice a whisper that cut through the din of rain, laced with dignity and resolve. The lead rider shifted, uncertain, and Nathaniel's steady presence beside her felt like a protective anchor against the tumultuous tide. It was as if time itself held its breath, suspended in the charged air. Clara could feel the storm radiating not just from the sky, but from the depths of their souls, an emotional catharsis ignited by the warmth of compassion rising like the sun behind the clouds. The lead rider's posture shifted, uncertainty transforming into vulnerability as he recognized the power of their confrontation. In that fleeting moment, Clara felt a revelatory clarity woven into the fabric of their lives, a connection born from adversity where each word, each heartbeat, echoed the unassailable truth that dignity is found not in power, but in understanding. The storm raged on, its fierce patter against the earth a symphony of renewal. Clara stood steadfast, her figure illuminated by the flickering lightning as she faced the lead rider and Nathaniel, the air around them heavy with anticipation. The turbulence of the moment washed over her like the rain, cleansing the past and beckoning forth the promise of a new beginning. With every heartbeat, the tension seemed to swirl, a tempest of emotions swirling in the dim light as Nathaniel took a step closer, his determination rising to meet the challenge of vulnerability Clara had laid bare. In the swirling chaos of the storm, Nathaniel's gaze softened, the walls he had built crumbling like dust in the rain. For the first time, he stood not as the arrogant rancher, but as a man grappling with his identity amidst the weight of expectation. Clara felt the unsteady rhythm of his breath beside her, the raw honesty in his eyes revealing a depth she had sensed beneath the surface, a flicker of understanding igniting between them. They were no longer adversaries. The roles they had played began to dissolve like mist, leaving only the profound truth of their shared humanity. The lead rider hesitated, confusion etched across his face, caught in the storm's current as the silence unspooled around them. Clara's heart raced with hope, a flicker within her that perhaps they could forge a path together, one where compassion reigned over arrogance. She sensed Nathaniel's resolve solidifying, the realization dawning that their connection held the power to shatter the chains of expectation and redefine the boundaries that had once divided them. It was a moment suspended in time, where the rain and thunder danced in harmony with the awakening of their souls. With a deep breath, Nathaniel spoke, his voice low but firm, piercing through the din of the storm. "You're right, Clara. I've hidden behind my wealth, thinking it could shield me from the realities of this world. But I see now," he continued, turning his gaze to the lead rider and then back to Clara. "I see the beauty in stories like yours, stories that shape us, stories that transcend the walls we build." The air between them shimmered, electric with possibility as Clara felt a warmth bloom in her chest, a flicker of hope that coursed through them, binding the three of them in a shared moment of reckoning. The lead rider, taken aback, took a step back, as if the fierceness of Nathaniel's words had reached into the depths of his bravado and unraveled it. The rain continued to pour, a relentless cascade that washed away the debris of their former selves, creating a contrasting canvas where new beginnings could take root. Clara stood taller, emboldened by the strength of their alliance, her heart swelling with the potential of their connection. With the storm bearing witness to their transformation, the moment felt ripe with possibility, where the past could find solace in the arms of understanding. As the rain began to subside, a soft glow emerged on the horizon, bathing the world in the first hints of dawn. It was a tender reminder that even the fiercest storms yield to the light, and Clara sensed a shift within Nathaniel, the contours of his face illuminated with a renewed sense of purpose. The shadows that had clung to him began to recede, revealing the essence of a man who, like her, had fought battles unseen. Together, they stood amidst the remnants of their former selves, prepared to embrace the journey ahead, guided by the wisdom birthed from their struggles, a testament to the resilience that lay within them both.